appreciate if anybody has their passion, because we're all passionate about this. You know, we all care about our community. We all care about what happens to East Harlem. So just understand that we're all here to make a collective, well-informed decision, and at the same time, a respectful decision for the betterment of this community.
Esther DeVore, Taino Towers, and CVH and Harlem Drums. First question is, will this be first rights to the community for property, like say stores, after school programs and everything? Plus, will it be low income for people that's living there so they don't be pushed out and separated from their families?
In terms of the affordability requirements for most of this is the MIH requirement, which is different options. Mandatory inclusionary housing. It's the zoning phrase that will be, or the zoning program that is mapped on top of this. Essentially, 25% of the units, the most common, popular option is 25% of the units would be affordable at an average of 60% of AMI.
The question, I'm not sure what your question is. You're
what
saying,
do you do about
are
people that's
people,
pushed out?
well, the people, I mean, there are going to be options. There are going to be opportunities.
Homeless shelters.
Let me finish. You asked me to answer your question, so let me answer it. So there are going to be opportunities, you know, through the MIH in new developments where people who make less than 30% AMI, which is about 15, 17, 18.
That's not true.
About $18,000 to come back. Now currently there are no subsidies for people who make lower than that. And we are working with our political officials and different organizations and agencies to make sure that we provide for those folks.
And I've been attending these meetings now for about the last month or so. I really wasn't aware of all of this rezoning stuff that was going on. And some people might say, well, you should be satisfied. You're a homeowner, you're collecting rents from people, and everything should be cool. But the nature of this nation has always been, from its inception, doublespeak. They talk with forked tongue to the Native Americans, and it's been doublespeak. I've heard a lot of stuff like affordable housing that's gonna be permanent. Permanent for when? For how long?
I have been to HPD, CDC, and I keep asking you, where the hell do I fit in?
Yeah, tell them.
Okay? Where the hell do I fit into your plans? Where do I fit in? How many people is going to be displaced, and how many homeless people are you going to place? Okay, I'm retired, and I'm living in the streets, and I'm still in this community. I put money into this community. Okay, so where do I fit in? And every time I get in front of y'all, y'all looking at me like I'm Klingon. Where do I fit in? Well, I'll be able to live here after 3 years and 3 months of volunteering and listening to this rezoning and coming to every meeting. You got a place for me? I'm retired. City workers don't make that much, and when you retire, you get less. I might be poor, but I'm rich in culture. I'm rich in this community, all right? Where do I fit in?
Where does she have to go? My understanding is that the affordable apartments that are being proposed to be put in place are only a small percentage of the total amount of apartments that are being built, 25%. And of that 25%, there's no guarantee for the people of East Harlem that they're gonna even be eligible for one of those apartments, because it's a lottery system that draws on people from all over the city. So there's no guarantee for the folks from East Harlem, which goes back to the point that I was trying to make from the beginning, which is that there's a bunch of double talk going on here, all right? The powers that be have targeted East Harlem and the East Harlems of this country, and made a determination that they want to run the folks who have been inhabitants here for generations out of here.
Right.
And so my proposal to the board is to shut it all down. to be bold enough to not go for the okie doke. Because right now we're being told that these are the rules. The rules, we determine the rules. If we're a government of the people and by the people and for the people, then the people determine the rules. And the people of the community have to make the point that, you know what, nothing gets built. We'll sit in the streets. We'll sit in these buildings. You want to take these buildings down while we're sitting in them? We'll sit in these buildings. Now, you might feel like I'm a homeowner, so what do I have to say about it? What do I have to lose? First of all, as the property value goes up, the taxes go up, all right? And then what they end up doing is telling you, you can't afford to even pay the taxes to stay here.
That's right.
All right? So, all of us folks who are sitting on this board, who understand the okie doke, and the okie doke has been in existence from the beginning, we cannot go for the okie doke. We have to lay it down and put it on the line that you can't have this. 15 communities of color.
All of them.
15 communities of color that he determined that he wanted to have this rezoning so that he could build his, quote, affordable housing for the homeless or for people who are low income. How come he didn't take it to Midtown Manhattan?
Hello.
Why are they trying to create a Midtown Manhattan in Harlem?
Right.
Not only that, but I've always understood that Harlem was a village and it had village status. Did the village status change? If it's village status, then it's a whole different status than other places in the community.
It's illegal.
And so we have to put our foot down. I don't know what the vote is going to be tonight, but I think that the vote should be from this community board, no deal. No deal.
What standard are we going to hold these developers that are taking hold of our neighborhood? What ethical standards do we get to hold them to? How do we make those stipulations that they cannot discriminate and create these racist policies against our community when they start developing our neighborhood like that? And for affordable housing, how long are they contractually obligated to maintain 25% before they can slash it down? Or before, like, what are the guidelines for these developers that we're letting take seize of this neighborhood, our neighborhood?
My name is Ray Rogers. I live at East River Landing on 109th and First Avenue. I certainly appreciate all the comments made here. I think they're terrific. I appreciate what you're all going through. If I'm talking about the zoning policies, they come directly from one source in the city. Comes from the Real Estate Board of New York down to the mayor and the city council. That's where it's coming from, these plans. And history has shown us, whether it be Williamsburg, whether it be Chinatown, whether it be Harlem, wherever it is, where a group comes together and does real planning for their community, wiped right off the map.
Right.
All right? Wiped right off the map. Yes. And as people say, this location, no place for poor people, working people to live. The communities that they created, it's gone. I understand recently they want to change, I think somebody suggested changing the name of Harlem.
Yeah.
Yorkville. Yorkville. What kind of shit is
Let
that?
me just say about the
I
real
got
estate.
7,500 signatures.
I'd like to ask one question, and again, I respect all of you up there, and I'm not here to give a big speech. How many of you up there, and they're sitting at the front, or in the audience, have read the book Zoned Out?
That's what
That's what's up.
Okay, zoned out. And that's what the Real Estate Board of New York is doing to all poor and working people. They're zoning us out. And moderate. I mean, you're going to have to be rich.
Right.
Okay? We don't need another high-rise. We don't need them in Harlem. We don't need them in East Harlem. We don't need them in Williamsburg. We don't need them in Chinatown. We don't need them in any of these places. They're just making a bunch of billionaire bullies and racketeers, which they are at the Real Estate Board of New York, bullies and racketeers, making them richer and richer at all of our expense. And thank you very much for your work. I hope we send them a message from this group here.
Yes.
Take it and shove it,
Up your ass.
okay, wherever you think I'm talking about.
Basically, in our assessment, the public health chapter doesn't address any of the real health impacts of the plan and the changes to what we think of as, the real determinants of health: education, housing, employment, socioeconomic status, discrimination. And we feel that the plans, that the draft environmental impact statement on public health significantly underestimates the potential negative health impacts of the proposed zoning in the East Harlem community, and that there are many unidentified needs for mitigating these negative public health impacts. And I'll just say that the primary force that we believe is really going to create negative health impacts is the displacement. And there's been some discussion here today about what the estimate is of the displacement. And just to be the person who actually calls out the number, that the number that is in the draft environmental impact study is 27. They estimate that 27 people and 11 apartments, 11 domestic units would directly be displaced. And we feel that that is a dramatic, a very significant underestimate. There are significant negative health impacts, anything from like stress, increased heart disease, diabetes, you name it. And then, you know, obviously when people become homeless, when they actually lose their apartments and can't find somewhere else to live, there are tremendous negative health impacts to that. And so I just want to put that out there, that we read that chapter, and we feel like it really doesn't fairly represent the potential negative harms to this community's health from the proposed plan.
Over the past few years, Community Board 11 has invested a considerable amount of time and resources into engaging the community and planning for the future. Through our initial engagement and planning along Park Avenue in 2013 to the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee, and more recently through our rezoning task force, we've helped create a vision for our community that acknowledges existing growth and change, but emphasizes the protection of existing community residents and neighborhood character. Through the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, we developed a simple rezoning framework and that embraced the city's new mandatory inclusionary housing, MIH program, supporting the minimum upzone needed to trigger MIH. This would require affordable housing in every new development in the rezone areas, but minimize the added density and help to preserve community character and stimulate local businesses and economic growth. Can you turn that off, please? Thank you. We suggested upzoning all avenues and 116th Street, intentionally deciding to spread a minimum increase in density throughout a large area, rather than a higher density rezoning in a limited area. We determined this would allow for development of affordable housing throughout the district, but not permit new development inconsistent with the existing community context. The Community Board and the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee were disappointed to learn that after 2 years of developing a community-based rezoning proposal, the Department of City Planning did not embrace all of the goals. While their proposal does rezone the community with the goal of developing affordable housing and economic stimulation, it does not preserve the existing character of the neighborhood. DCP has instead decided to allow the highest density residential districts allowed under state and city law in a limited geography on Park Avenue and 3rd Avenue, rather than spreading out a minimum upzoning across the neighborhood. DCP left out the area south of 104th Street, all of 1st Avenue, as well as the lower stretches of Madison Avenue, all of which were included in the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. The need to develop affordable housing and job creation is not just an East Harlem goal. It is clearly a citywide goal, but the Department of City Planning must approach this goal without impacting the community excessively and respecting its existing character. DCP instead chose to extend the same density found in the Upper East Side into East Harlem. Community Board 11 feels strongly that the proposal as it is does not conform to our core values, the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, and the CB11 Park Avenue recommendations. And CB11 has developed the following recommendations. I'm going to now turn it over to my Vice Chair, Jeremiah.
Good evening to everyone here. I am happy to see the room full. I want to talk about right now, the gentleman, I believe Mr. Rogers, had mentioned the Zoned Out book. It was a book that was early on recommended by the East Harlem Rezoning Task Force to be required reading. Engaged in that. Found a very compelling read, and one thing that stuck out to me is the fact that, as you had stated earlier, that we see historically whenever there's been a neighborhood planning process that has often been wiped off, right? The city has always seems to have ignored it, saying thank you for all of your years of work, but we're deciding to go in this direction anyway, right? That is precisely what we have here. We have had years and years of public engagement, of community stakeholders coming to the table, elected officials, local elected officials, community organizers, private, nonprofit research organizations, community residents engaging in workshop after workshop, balancing competing interests and tensions, knowing that we also have a wide spectrum of incomes in our community, but also that we have the second highest concentration of public housing in the nation. So we're looking at all of those things, and we're coming together to do a process over the years. And what we found is, just as the chair of the Rezoning Task Force just stated in her testimony, that the DC proposal as it currently stands, it wholly ignores the community planning that we've engaged in, just as it did, as you stated, in Williamsburg, and just as it did in other areas as well, right? So that right now is not lost on us. And I'm now going to go through some recommendations which have been the process of this years-long balancing goal in the community. All right, and these are the things that we have determined, Community Board 11 in partnership with the public, all of our constituents, and these are things that I know to you all are missing from the DCP proposal, right? So again, we are discussing right now what the city has proposed. And here are the counterbalancing things that the community board in conjunction with the community has laid out. So when we talk about housing, which is a major concern in the community and which is paramount in anybody's stability, Community Board 11, we strongly feel that there needs to be a renewal of anti-displacement legal services contracts. Many individuals who have been involved in it know it principally as the Tenants' Rights Coalition, which is formed by a partnership. The city has contracted the Legal Aid Society and Legal Services of New York, to engage in anti-displacement services for those areas that the mayor had proposed for rezoning. East Harlem is one of them. Now, we want a renewal of those contracts, but as a housing practitioner, I can tell you that the contracts miss the mark and they stymie the ability of legal services providers to provide true anti-displacement representation. Okay, so our demand is that there be a renewal of the anti-displacement legal services contracts, but with realistic benchmarks determined by current housing law practitioners that enable thoughtful and effective group representation in order to harmonize the city's rhetoric, the mayor's rhetoric with providing anti-displacement services, with reality, right? Actually providing effective representation. So we demand that those contracts be renewed, but renegotiated on terms that actually allow us to meet the objectives that are stated that the city allegedly wants to fulfill. We also, as also stated in the Movimiento para Justicia en el Barrio, the community group, their 10-point plan, Community Board 11 agrees wholeheartedly that we need an increase in the number of HPD inspectors as well as an increase in the number of convenient times and dates for tenants to have their apartments inspected pursuant to complaints about conditions in their apartment. Community Board 11, also in conjunction with the 10-point plan, believes strongly that there should be an assurance of adequate follow-up on whether the violations were cured, right, by the landlord. Efficiently issuing fines where the violations go uncorrected beyond the time permitted by law. Importantly, HPD must increase its response to complaints regarding emergency conditions, such as lack of heat or hot water. And as well as promptly fine for those violations, and engaging in the HPD emergency repair program, deploying it to make those repairs since the landlord is not making those repairs, and fining and billing those repairs to the landlord. We agree wholeheartedly with Movimiento's plan in that respect. Also, we agree with Movimiento's 10-point plan that we should greatly increase the HPD outreach on HPD's role in addressing housing maintenance issues, to create and publicize an HPD website with consolidated user-friendly information regarding housing maintenance issues. We want the public to be as informed as possible on their rights when it comes to conditions in their apartments, and to have an easy to access and understandable way to show them how that they can remedy that or gain help in correcting those conditions. There should be an increased proactive outreach by the city to identify landlords who could benefit from subsidies or refinancing, for example, refinancing of mortgages, to bring unregulated buildings into a rent regulation scheme. So for example, if you are a small landlord that has less than 6 units in a building, there's a good chance that you have unregulated housing, all right? They're technically market apartments, and you could charge whatever it is, whatever rent you deem to be acceptable, right, which you wanted. But we want to have an identification scheme to try and bring as many of those as well to protect the tenants, because many tenants who live in those buildings as well historically are low income as well and long-term Harlem residents. We also want an establishment of a citywide certification of no harassment, right? So this is a certification that a landlord would have to attain to certify that there has been no harassment in any of their buildings that contain regulated units before being able to apply for any demolition permits or deregulation permits. At a minimum, if there is not a citywide establishment of this program, CB 11 calls for the expansion of the current program to include all of Community District 11, all of East Harlem, okay? Even the areas that are outside of the proposed rezoning, because we know that they will be affected as well with corresponding increases in land value. The establishment of any MIH should be deeper, more affordable to address the needs of our community. Community Board 11's position for many years has been 50-30-20 MIH, which means that 50% of any new development would have to be affordable. 30%, 20% of AMI, or 20% of the new units would have to be affordable to an upper limit of 30% AMI. So 20% of the new units have to be reserved for low and very low income folks. 30% of the additional affordable units would have to be resolved for the middle income bands, right? Much of our community lives in that band as well, in those bands as well. 42% of our community lives between 31 and 120% of AMI, okay? That might sound like a lot, it's not. Those are a lot of people too who are at 115% of AMI are working folks who are severely rent burdened as well. So 30% of any new development would speak to those income bands. It is also firmly our position that any public land that is used for development must be reserved for 100% affordable residential housing, which also includes any NYCHA infill process. Furthermore, it is CB 11's position that the NYCHA residents must be engaged in that process, must be consulted and sign off on the use of any infill procedures as well. CB 11 also stands against, as George had mentioned before, there are, as it currently stands under MIH, if a developer doesn't have all of the affordable housing required under MIH in that same building, you can offset it with some off-site building, another building. CB 11 stands against that as well, because that encourages segregation, all right? It encourages segregation along income lines and often along racial lines as well. We also strongly believe that there should be priority given to local nonprofit developers in all RFPs for any development on public land, right? So we want this public land as a unique opportunity for us to speak to 100% affordability and also to bring into that local nonprofit developers who have been engaged in the community, who have as their goal not profit, but rather their missions, right? We also firmly believe that any city and state subsidies that are used to incentivize deeper affordability, that the city must ensure that those that are directed towards housing preservation and deeper MIH affordability continue in perpetuity, regardless of federal budget allocations, right? We live in the era of Donald Trump, Republican-controlled Congress. We hear all the time about cuts that are being made to a lot of programs that help the vast majority of Americans, low income, moderate income Americans. So we're demanding that any subsidies that are set aside to meet these goals of actual affordability for the East Harlem community is insulated, that they are insulated against potential federal budget cuts. Okay? Open space, that includes open spaces too, I apologize. Any subsidies for preservation of affordable housing, new development, and open spaces. We also demand that the M11 sanitation garage that is proposed for relocation must be a fully enclosed facility with updated technology. The borough president recently released something as well in that exact same, adopting that position, rejecting the application for the relocation of the M11 garage without those conditions being met, right? We've talked a lot, if any of you has come to any of the meetings where we discussed the sanitation garage and the proposal to move the M11 garage, we know that all around the city, in more affluent areas, there are state-of-the-art facilities, fully enclosed, that mitigate any impact, any health impacts on their community. That the city must also relocate the M10 sanitation garage to comport with the fair share mandate. So right now we have a sanitation garage that is officially a Community District 10, Central Harlem sanitation garage, but that is located in our community, in this Community District 11. So that gives us 2 sanitation garages. We already know, a lot of us, about the widespread health, particularly asthma, for example, with a lot of congestion that's contributed with as well with the sanitation facilities. So we firmly believe that that should be relocated to Central Harlem under the fair share mandate. Also demanding increased funding for asthma treatment centers in our community. George touched on a lot of this in his presentation, but just to summarize some of the important bullet points as well when it comes to any rezoning. It must be done pursuant, again, to the community plan, not the DCP proposal. The DCP proposal requires, or asks for, is proposing an upzoning that is too dense for us. Again, it is proposed to look like the East Harlem area, or rather Upper East Side area, and we're not getting enough affordable housing in exchange for that, right? So, we're recommending a maximum of an R9 or R9 equivalent upzoning. Okay, the only exception being the 125th Street Special District, which George talked about, which can support with its transportation networks and current design can support the slightly more dense building. Also recognize that this goes in conjunction with what I just stated earlier, that we want that zoning is the minimum amount needed to trigger mandatory inclusionary housing. But the mandatory inclusionary housing that Community Board 11 is talking about is a far cry from what the city's talking about. The city's talking about what everyone here is mad about, right? 75, 25%, and then averaging to 60% of AMI, which leaves the majority of our East Harlem community behind, right? So ours is the 50-30-20 model, which will encapsulate the vast majority of our East Harlem residents. We would require as well special permit application process for any proposal to build commercial parking garages, since we know that they are very disruptive, that they take up a lot of space, and produce very few jobs in reality. So we would want to subject any proposal to build commercial parking garages to a special permitting process that the public could weigh in on. An enhanced commercial district on 116th Street, limiting the size of storefronts. Right, so we want to ensure that small businesses can thrive by limiting the width of the storefronts on the streets to keep, for example, big box retailers, chain stores from coming in and pushing out a lot of smaller businesses and local businesses. We also firmly stand against the inclusion of the Eugene McCabe Playground in the rezoning proposals. Both the Eugene McCabe Playground and the Henry J. Carter Specialty Hospital must be carved out of the proposal to rezone East Harlem. We also firmly believe that we should include the 127th Street superblock between Park Avenue and Lexington Avenue, and include the currently carved out portions of North Park Avenue between 128th and 131st Street. Also, as George has stated earlier, if 116th Street is rezoned, that the public transportation must be the access points, stairwells, elevators must be folded into the building envelope, right, to allow for less congestion. All right. Now, finally, speaking to local economy, workforce development, we firmly believe that any responsible development in line with the community's interests must also provide boost to our East Harlem constituents in terms of employment and skills training. CB11 believes that we must utilize local community-based organizations for workforce development, training, and placement on East Harlem projects, establishing adequately funded workforce development programs which offer the necessary certifications and apprenticeships to take advantage of working on any crews that are working on any developments. It is our position, our firm position, that at least 35% of any workforce on any of these projects must come from the East Harlem area, East Harlem community. The funding for community partnerships with it, we also believe strongly in funding for community partnerships with existing local reentry programs, right? To facilitate productive transitions for those of our friends and family that are returning to society after criminal convictions. Many of us here are very familiar with the collateral consequences, the impact that having a felony conviction will have on you. In terms of, it goes on and on, right? I mean, you can be discriminated against in housing, in employment, you're ineligible for public housing, you do not qualify for student loans if you want to go back to school and get your education. So we're calling for the funding of the community partnerships for those programs, to specifically include them in these training and apprenticeships pipelines, to enable those individuals as well to take advantage of any projects for productive employment. We also support the creation of tax incentive programs for commercial property owners to ensure growth of small businesses, and to incentivize contracts with local, minority-owned and women-owned businesses. And we also demand that the community maintain its engagement both before, during, and after any construction, with regular reports to Community Board 11 to track the progress on everything that I just laid out, to ensure that compliance is actually being met. So there is a more comprehensive narrative document that we have. So if you ever want a good read, or if you just want to fall asleep someday, you can take advantage. This will be part of the public record. We have a lot of what I just read are the bullet points. We expand on it, we talk more in depth, and it includes some other things as well that reflect the ideals and the core values that we found in engaging the community. But for now, this is for you to see a general overview and summary bullet points of where the community board stands with respect to any potential rezoning.
So the final recommendation is coming on Tuesday at the full board. We took a position here at this committee level, but now it's going to be taken on Tuesday, June 20th at 6 o'clock at the Icahn.
So let me just add, I'm not taking over the meeting, but just to let everyone know that this is clearly just a recommendation which they will present to the full board. All of the information that you heard here tonight, even though we weren't able to give you handouts, will be on the website, including the comprehensive discussion of the study of what all their findings. You may not have heard everything you wanted to hear, but clearly it's in that packet. So I encourage you to read that, but at the end of the day, this committee is recommending no. No.
To the full board.
To the full board.
The board still has to vote.
So, again, I ask that you come, there will be, I ask that you do come, I ask that you are also able to speak briefly, and everyone knows that I do say briefly, in public comments if you feel you need to add something else to whatever we've said. But clearly the full board will be voting on this, and it will be at Mount Sinai, as you said, the Goldwurm Auditorium. Now let me also say, there's a capacity for 200 people. And if we reach that 200 people capacity, we will not be allowed to let people in. Okay. And they do not have an overflow room because of the type of way they're set up. So hopefully get there early enough, get a seat.